So I just finished watching a YouTube video from Nintendo where the guy in charge of development, whose name escapes me right now, I'm sorry. He basically apologized and said they've been working on Metroid for a while and they just haven't been able to nail it down. It's not the same quality that they would want. And because it's not the same quality that they would want, they've not canceled it, but they're throwing away everything that they've got so far and starting over. They're going to be working with the original developers of the Metroid Prime trilogy, Retro Studios. Those guys are going to be working on this game, and it's going to be a long time before we hear anything else about Metroid Prime. This is definitely disappointing, to say the least. I was really looking forward to playing Metroid Prime 4. But I have to say, I don't know that I'm super surprised. I mean, I'm surprised that I'm surprised that they're starting from scratch and that it just didn't work. But what I'm not surprised by is the idea that it would be delayed. I always felt like Metroid Prime 4, its announcement, was something that Nintendo felt like it had to do, not that it wanted to do. I don't think Nintendo was ready to announce Metroid Prime 4 when they did. But let's go back in time just a little bit and we look at E3. E3, the year that 2016, E3 2016, when they... I mean, all we have from Metroid Prime 4 so at that point is a logo. That's it. We didn't have anything else. And I feel like Nintendo, like their hands were tied. They had to announce a new Metroid Prime game at that point for Switch, because that's when they announced Metroid Samus Returns, which was a remake of Metroid 2 that came out on the 3DS. And, a lot of people say it's awesome. So for them to bring out a 3DS game on with Metroid and not announce that, yes, we're also working on a Metroid game for the Switch, I think that would have upset a lot of fans. There would have been a lot of confusion. And I think at the end of the day, that would have hurt Switch sales. So I think it made sense for Nintendo to make the announcement at that time. It's like they just didn't have a choice. They had to make that announcement. So, they told us that they were working on it. All we got was a logo and then, radio silence. And it was radio silence because, honestly, I think that if they hadn't announced that 3DS game, that they wouldn't have been ready to announce Metroid Prime 4. Usually what happens is a game company, most game companies, they wait until development has progressed far enough that they're confident in what they are announcing. And of course, there's delays with every game company, but Nintendo fell in this trap because they were announcing Metroid Prime or Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS, and they just didn't have a choice. They had to announce Metroid Prime 4. So they announced it way too soon, and it turns out that they weren't able to get it exactly the way they want. So they've canceled what they've worked on so far. I'm sure that there's some assets that they'll be able to reuse, but he basically said that they are starting from the ground up with Retro Studios. Retro Studios is making Metroid Prime 4. We weren't sure if they were working on Metroid Prime 4 or not before. I don't know if this means that they weren't working on it before, because there's been like those weird tweets from people that work at Retro that have like they're saying that they were having prime rib for lunch or something like that, and people were reading into that. Oh, I wonder if this means that they were the ones working on Metroid Prime. We didn't know. Excuse me. We didn't know what they were working on. Like for a while now, a lot of people have been asking, what is it that Retro Studios is up to, and we weren't sure what was happening. maybe they were working on Metroid Prime all along, and Nintendo just looked at what they have so far and said, nope, this isn't good enough. You need to raise the standard. And Retro said, if you want us to do that, we're going to have to start from scratch. And that's what's happening now. Or maybe Nintendo was developing it in-house and they just couldn't nail it down. And they decided, what we're doing here is not working. Making a first-person shooter is outside of our wheelhouse. Maybe we should go to the company that did such an amazing job with it before, and they brought it to Retro Studios and said, can you guys fix this? And Retro Studios said, well, there's nothing here. There's not enough here for us to fix. If you want us to fix it, we'll have to start from scratch. So maybe that is the scenario here. There's a lot of unknowns, but what we do know is that Metroid Prime 4 is delayed, and I don't expect to hear anything anything about it for probably, I'm going to guess, a couple years. This is probably now going to be one of those games that ends up hitting the tail end of the Switch. Kind of like Nintendo announced a new Zelda game for the Wii U, and we waited and we waited and we waited, and it never came until the very end, and then it was kind of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out on the Wii U, and it came out on the Switch as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the kind of thing that happens with Metroid Prime 4, although, to be fair, Mr. Kimishima and Mr. Furukawa, I believe, they both have said, the former and current president of Nintendo, they both have said that they expect that the Nintendo Switch will have a long lifespan. And if that's the case, then maybe it won't span console generations. Maybe it'll just be on Switch, but I don't think we're going to see it I know we're not going to see it in 2019, and I doubt we're going to see it in 2020. We might hear about it in a Nintendo Direct at the end of 2020, maybe, but game development takes a really long time, and I know that there's a lot of people who are disappointed about this, but would you really have rather got a Metroid Prime game that just wasn't very good, or would you rather wait and get a Metroid Prime game that was amazing? For me, I've got so much to play right now I can't keep up, so I vote delay, and it doesn't matter what I vote. It looks like Nintendo agrees with me. They want to make this the best Metroid game that they can, and I'm willing to wait for one.